The more skill you have, the less equipment you need. Luckily for us, bushcraft, survival and preparedness skills often come free. But for the equipment needs that we do have, those bug out essentials, I've got a breakdown of budget bug out items that you can start adding to your bug out bag today. This is either stuff that you'll find around your house already, that you can buy really cheaply or secondhand, or is completely free and found in the wilderness. And even if you've already got your bug out bag completely packed, you've got all the equipment that you need, stick around because there's some great improvisation tips in this video. I'm Clarice, welcome to the Live Ready channel. You don't need massive amounts of money to get started in preparedness or to pack a bug out bag. You can even just take an extra backpack that you've got lying around. Maybe it was a promotional item that you got from the gym. Go around your house and see what you could possibly use in a survival situation or in a bug out situation. Put it in there and bam, you've got a bug out bag packed. And sure, as we go along and we start to develop our skills and we develop tastes in certain equipment, we do actually end up swapping out some things. If you don't have the cash to go out and buy a tarp right away, but you have a ground sheet, an old camping ground sheet, and these, you can come by these so cheaply, start off with that. It is going to be quite heavy. These items are not your ultra lightweight items, and you'll see that if you watch the videos made by the bushcraft community or by the preppers community, most of them either carry a bivvy of some sort or a military poncho or some of the other tarp. Those can actually be quite expensive. So to get yourself started off, just pack a ground sheet or a tarp. As you use that item more often, you'll start to see that there is benefit to having something that's more breathable, more waterproof than a ground sheet is. I've got a bit of rope on the table here as well. You don't have to have paracord in your bug out bag. You can have a cheaper nylon rope. The reason why we like paracord is because the military specifications for it tell us that it is a strong rope. It can really hold a lot of weight for the size, and because it's smaller, it's also lightweight. So paracord is a really versatile route to go. But if you don't have the cash to fork out to go and buy a whole roll of paracord, then start off with something cheaper, a slightly cheaper nylon rope that's not going to retain a lot of water and it's not going to become heavy when it gets wet. Now, I've done a lot of camping in my life, and I learned this from a friend at a very young age. She always used to have a MYLAR blanket or a space blanket that she put underneath her sleeping bag. MYLAR reflects your body heat back to you, so that helps you to sleep warm and to maintain some of your core body temperature. It helps with thermoregulation, and it's going to keep your shelter warmer in general as well. So having a little MYLAR blanket just underneath you, you don't have to wrap yourself in it. You can literally just lie on top of it. That's also going to help you to stay warm at night if you need to spend the night somewhere. I like to keep a roll of duct tape around because it helps me to repair my shelter really easily and really effectively as well. You can also keep something like a little bit of super glue. Both of these items are really cheap, and you might even just find them in your shed or in your garage, so go and dig around. As it happens, you can use duct tape and a little bit of plastic, like a plastic bag, to improvise a sucking chest wound dressing as well, so that you've got a one-way valve over a chest wound. In Matthew 14:13, we see Jesus bless 5 loaves and 2 fish and hand them out to thousands of people. And as he hands out food, it just multiplies. And I think there's a message in there for us who practice a lifestyle of preparedness as well. God wants us to be prepared. We have to come with something. We have to have those 5 loaves and 2 fish ready. And what we do have, he will multiply. So you can prepare according to your means, just whatever you can. And where we fail, God steps in. And for whatever equipment you don't have, God might put you in contact with someone who does have the equipment that you're short. You don't actually have to have the most expensive equipment on the market in order to ensure that you're going to survive in a bug out situation. Something like this is a Bush Baby multi-tool. It's something I also got at the local hardware store. It's really cheap, but you know what? It's exactly what I need if I'm hunting in the wilderness. So a little bit of cheap wire. This is quite a soft wire. What would be really nice is if you choose one that's got a file to it. A file and a saw. Even if it's not going to last long term, it's not going to be the best quality that you can find, you're still going to be able to make use of this, and good use at that too. For urban use, there are also a couple of torque bits in here. It's actually the reason why I bought this is because I thought the torque bits were really cool. So I don't think they're going to be the strongest. They might probably strip at some point, but at least I've got something set up in my bag. I've got just a little bit of jute twine here. This is something that you can use to start a fire as well. So you see a lot of these things here have multiple purposes and applications. So it's great to have a little bit of twine. It will also help you just to set up some things around your campsite. Maybe you need to build a tripod so that you can hang a pot over the fire. Having a little bit of twine with you could actually help you to save your paracord for building your shelter. Go to the fishing store or the outdoor store, buy yourself a couple of fishing hooks. It's really going to save you so much time not trying to make a fishing hook. You can improvise things like bottle caps and things like that, and a wine cork just as a float. And then of course don't forget the fishing line. Now, something that I was actually going to leave off the table here today and then thought, hang on a second, there's actually so much to say about this, is a slingshot. These are quite popular in the African bush, not just because the children like to play with them, but because you can actually hunt small game with this. Even if you don't carry a slingshot with you in your bag, this is quite easy to make, provided that you have the rubber materials to go with it. Always carrying a knife on you is also going to make a difference to whether you're approached by unforeseen company in the bush. Further to hunting and bushcraft skills, we usually want to have at least one blade in our bag. The ideal is to have two, so if you've got a multi-tool that has a blade on it and you add something like a fixed blade knife, you're good to go. Not all fixed blade knives are made equal. There is something to say for the more expensive, more hardy, better designed knives, but at the same time you get a company like MORAKNIV that makes these brilliant Swedish knives that are so easy to come by. I mean, if you can find it in South Africa, you can find it anywhere in the world. They're also not expensive. I think I paid about 300 South African Rand for this knife about 2 years ago, and it's probably one of the most versatile knives that I own. So this knife doesn't come with a 90-degree spine. I asked the bladesmith to put one on for me. He even left a burr on the side for me so that I can easily start a fire with a ferro rod. Even though it's not a full tang knife, it's a really tough and hardy knife. So I've used this for everything from batoning through to starting fires. And you can even chop down branches with it if they are small branches, especially if it's softwood. I like that it has a Scandinavian grind to it. The idea behind having a fixed blade knife in your arsenal is that it's something that you can use to baton, to process wood for a fire. It's nice and strong, and it's a hardy piece of equipment. Now, this is a stainless steel knife. It's really a brilliant knife to start with. It doesn't actually help that you go and buy really expensive equipment and then find out later that it's not really something that you would have preferred after you've learned the skills and after you've used that piece of equipment for a while. It might actually be worthwhile buying a couple of cheap knives to start with and deciding, do you like a Scandi grind or do you like a flat grind? Do you like a rubberized handle or do you like a wooden handle? So buying cheap equipment to start with is not always the worst idea. This is a small whetstone. They're mined in Prieska. I bought it from one of the local bladesmiths. Often the local bladesmiths in your area will be able to find things like this really cheaply. It's about the same price as a cup of coffee around here. That's really cheap for a whetstone. And also having a small one in your bug out bag will help you to maintain your gear. Further to equipment, you don't actually need something like a silky saw. We love those because they are so effective at getting through wood, but you can start off with something like a small wire saw. The advantage that this has is it is really lightweight, and because the wire saw is so long, you can actually saw through quite a bit of wood with it. You have the advantage, that mechanical advantage of having a long piece of wire with which to try and get through that wood. Now this one has two little cuffs on it that you can use, you can put them in your hands, but I believe they were actually originally made to be used in something like a frame, so basically like a buck saw or like a bow saw. The other advantage that this has if you don't attach it to a branch is that you can go around a tree and pull towards you. Put whatever you've got in your bag for the moment, and as you go along, try and substitute that or replace those items with items better suited to a bug out situation. Something that I recently took out of my bag when we did a bug out wild camp is a cloth, just a simple face cloth. It helps to clean things. It also helps to dry things off. And you'll be surprised the amount of times that you land up in the rain in the bush and you really just need something to dry your hands off quickly so that you can dress a wound, or you can cook something, or you can start a fire. Having something like little cloth is also a great way to keep some of the other fabric that you can char as part of your fire kit in order for you to start fires quickly. But I keep a bit of dry tinder on me. This is something that you're going to find for free in the wilderness. You just have to get to know what works really well. So this is a grass that grows in the area, and whenever I see it, I just pick it and stuff it in bags and keep it with me because it burns so easily. It's so easy to make a ferro rod fire with that. Well, it usually is, unless it's like really humid. So I just pick that stuff as I go. The same goes for fat wood. So fat wood is something that you find often in pine, standing deadwood. It's basically the resinous hardwood of a pine tree. And this is often very useful if you make shavings with it, or if you have a little branch, you can make a little fat wood feather stick and then start a fire quite easily with that. So it's useful to keep things, resources from the environment, in your bug out bag as well. For all you know, you're going to have to leave home when it's raining, or it's been raining for days, everything's wet and there's no dry materials for you to start a survival fire. For the instance where you can't actually get a fire going, have some things in your bag that are accelerants that will work. I recently filmed a video where I was trying to make a fire. It was just too humid. All of the materials in the environment were wet. It was absolutely pointless trying to make even a feather stick because it was just all wet. The only dry stuff I had on me was the bit of fat wood and a bit of tinder, but not even that was going to burn. So I needed an accelerant because it was so humid, and because all my materials were wet, I used a bit of hand sanitizer, this little guy over here. Anything that is liquid is going to be heavier in your bag. It's going to be difficult to carry because it adds a lot of weight to your bag. So try and save that for actual water, that water weight. But having a small little hand sanitizer in your bag can also help you, not just to start fire, but to clean your hands if you need to dress a wound, or even to dress the area around a wound or to clean it. The other option that you have is something like petroleum jelly or Vaseline. Tissues are a great way to start a fire, especially if you've got something like a magnifying lens in your fire kit. So this guy over here, I think I got this really cheaply from this was a stationery store. Just keep a magnifying lens around. It uses no resources from your fire kit if you use a magnifying lens with some natural tinder. If you're really struggling, use a tissue. The tissues light quite easily. Tissues also take care of some of our basic sanitary needs. Starting a fire through primitive methods, if you don't have the skills or if your resources are low, can be one of the hardest things to do in a survival situation. Remember, you're not only going to be out of your normal environment, but mentally you're also going to be suffering a bit. So to put yourself in the situation where you've prepared nothing for a fire kit is really a mistake. Luckily, putting together a fire kit can actually be quite cheap. So once again, we've got something that's really easy to come by, a Bic lighter. I always put a little bit of duct tape around my Bic lighter because the duct tape actually lights quite easily. So you can use that to start a fire as well. And just for everyday repairs, you can just grab it off there to put a plaster on something or to repair your shelter. In an emergency where you really need to get a fire started quickly, that's when you're going to use the Bic lighter. However, a Bic lighter is a depletable resource. It's something that you're going to work through quite fast. So you don't want to grab that every time. Ideally, what you would rather use is something like a ferro rod that you can use long term, that takes a long time to deplete that resource, and it's relatively easy if you have worked on the skill and you've acquired that skill. Now, this is once again where skill and knowledge is going to help you more than equipment. You can go online and you can buy a flint, okay? In South Africa, it's actually quite difficult to come across a flint stone like this. However, if you know what to look for, take your steel striker, walk through the bush, pick up a couple of stones and see which ones you can start fire with. The more knowledge you have about what to look for, the easier you're going to make it for yourself. As for the steel striker, you don't have to buy a steel striker like this that's also a bearing block for a bow drill. You can actually just take an old steel file, chop it in half, and voila, you've got a high carbon steel striker. As for the actual fire kit, this is just an old, I think it might have been a chocolates tin or a biscuit tin. You can use any tin to char material in, and that's going to be what you use to start a fire with your flint and steel striker. That takes a light really easily. So char some material. Like I said, you can use the cloth, the washcloth, to char some material. I've got some other things in here. I've got a little bit of paracord that I can use to make a bow drill, because that's really difficult to improvise in the wilderness. And then a little tea candle, other than the matches. So this tea candle I can light quite easily with a lighter. It will light quite fast. Then I can use it as sort of like tinder in order to start my fire or to dry out other materials as I need. I can also use a little tea candle to get warm. So if I'm really cold, I'm starting to feel the effects of the elements, I can light this, put my shelter over myself or a blanket over myself. Keeping that little candle inside the shelter with me is going to warm the air inside the shelter quite effectively, and it's a great way to combat hypothermia, to warm a small pocket of air around yourself so that you can maintain your core body temperature. With my fire kit, I always keep something like a welding glove. You get them from the hardware store quite cheaply. I think I paid 60 Rand for 2 gloves. And if you don't have the money to take out to spend 60 Rand to go and buy 2 gloves, see if you can split that cost with, maybe you've got some friends who are preppers as well. So the welding glove is great because I can use that to make fire. I can use it to build shelter. If I need to gather debris or wood or anything that I'm doing that requires my hands to be protected, maybe I'm sawing wood or maybe I'm busy, I don't know, doing what, but protect your hands. That's what it comes down to. This actually says protect your hands. And this is something I bought years ago at the local grocery store. For whatever reason, they sell camping gear. Anyway, I bought the LENSATIC compass just thinking, oh, I'll play with it and I'll figure out how to navigate. And then a friend taught me how to use a LENSATIC compass. This is quite cheap. I mean, you don't have to fork out thousands of rands to buy a really nice compass. However, there is something to be said for something like the Suunto MC2 compass that you can actually adjust for the angle of declination. But once you start doing a bit more navigation and you start using those skills more, you'll start to want a square protractor, not the one that you harvested from your kids' stationery box, and then your LENSATIC compass might also get replaced as well. As part of my clothing system, I have a buff, and you don't have to buy an expensive buff. You can literally just buy something that you find from the general store or even a hardware store. The reason why I've got the carabiner sitting with the buff is you can actually improvise a tourniquet with a buff and 2 carabiners. You'll need 2, not 1. So what you would do is you would take the buff and wrap it around the limb that you need to put pressure on. You clip 1 carabiner on, then you clip another carabiner onto it. You twist the carabiner until it goes really tight. And once it's really tight, you clip it onto the second carabiner, and that's going to help you to stop that flow of blood. If you don't have a tourniquet or you don't have a second tourniquet, because often we keep 2 tourniquets, 1 is none and 2 is 1, this can be a great way to improvise if you really are in need. Now, I just want to say that having to improvise medical equipment is really not ideal. The ideal is really that you have a medical kit packed to protect our bodies from the elements and to ensure that we maintain our core body temperature. We also have a clothing system. So having something like a waterproof layer and a base layer inside your bug out bag already and a pair of shoes is going to get you a long way. You may have to evacuate in the middle of the night. I've had to evacuate in the middle of the night. I was wearing my pajamas. I honestly can say, put some clothes in your bug out bag, put a pair of shoes in there. So this is a base layer. It's a polyester base layer that I bought from one of our local grocery shops. I think I paid around the same amount that you would pay for the average cup of coffee in this country. So that tells you it's not a whole lot. It has a fluffy inside, and it is a polyester fabric, so it's going to wick moisture, but it's also going to keep me warm. So if I don't have a blanket or a ultralight sleeping bag that I carry in my bug out bag, that already is going to help me to maintain my core body temperature. Further to that, I want to stay dry, so having a waterproof layer is great. Now this is a poncho. It's not a military poncho, it's just one that I got from the pharmacy. It cost me about 3 times what the thermal base layer cost me, and you can use this to set up a shelter if you need just a quick roof or something to shield you from the rain or the worst of the weather. You can actually just use a poncho as a shelter. If you don't have a tarp or you've just got a poncho in your get home bag, that should at least keep you dry. All of the torches that I've got here are Magneto torches. They are really cheap to come by. Most of the time I just get them from the hardware store. So I've got a little headlamp. I think I paid 80 Rand for this guy. It's got a red light to it, which I really like because it doesn't interfere with your night vision as much as white light does. So if you're hiking at night or you're trekking through the bush, you can use that. It's also a little bit less conspicuous than what a white light is. But having a decent torch in your bug out bag that you can use to set up a shelter or do some campsite activities, especially if you're setting up shelter at night in the dark, this is really helpful. Like have a super beam as well. What we sometimes do is we take this one and we hang it in a tree and it sort of illuminates the entire area around us. The other option that you have is something like this Magneto solar recharging torch. So it has this little solar panel at the back. As soon as it gets into the sun, it starts charging. This little red light goes on. And then once it's charged, or even before it's charged, you can switch it on. This is a 900 lumens lamp. So it's nice to put around your campsite, and you can charge any electronic devices that you've got. Maybe you've got a cell phone that you're trying to keep charged as well. And then you can just hang it on the outside of your pack, and as you travel through the bush, it charges and you've got a light by the end of the day. Now, once you've got a fire started, you're probably going to want to boil water or cook some food. For that, you need a container in which you can boil water. So I really recommend having some or the other stainless steel or even aluminium. I know not everybody is a fan of aluminium, but anodized aluminium, something like this little pot. I've carried this pot on so many hikes, I've even forgotten how many. I can't even count them anymore. You can see that it's a bit worse for wear. But there's nothing wrong with a little pot like this, and they're cheap to come by. The other advantage of having something like a little cooking pot like this is if you are in really cold conditions, you can take some rocks, put them by a fire until they get hot. Then you can take those hot rocks out of the fire, put them in your little aluminium pot or in your cooking set, and put that inside your shelter. Those rocks are going to release a lot of heat over a period of time, and it's going to warm the inside of your shelter. Using this little aluminium pot, I can boil water, I can cook food, I can collect water, and I can even use it as a shovel. So something like this is really a versatile piece of equipment. You absolutely need at least one way to store and boil water. This is my preference, an aluminium canteen cup. And it basically is just a nesting cup with a canteen. So I can boil water in this, and then I can contain it and carry it with me. I've seen these at second-hand stores. You can pick them up quite cheaply. Buy them second-hand, just give it a good boil, clean it, sanitize it, and it's good to go again. Have a look at the military shops. They also tend to keep these guys. And I can also cook some food in that. So that's the other advantage of having a little nesting cup. So I can cook food and boil my water all at the same time. The little handkerchief that came out is basically just what I use to pre-filter my water. Before I put it through a water filtration system, I always want to remove most of the debris, or even before I boil it. That way I'm not drinking all the leaves and twigs and things that are floating down the river. Now, something like this little cooking stove, this is really a cheap one. It's actually quite a heavy one. But this is going to help you to make fire, boil water, cook food in an environment where making fire is not really something you want to do. If you're looking to lay low, you don't want somebody to see smoke, or you don't want to be found by the smell of your fire, then using something like this is great. It doesn't last particularly long. I think the longest that one of these small canisters of gas has lasted me on a hike is probably 5 days, cooking breakfast and dinner on the gas stove. So you can maybe make about 10 meals on that gas stove. You're not going to get a whole lot more out of that, and then you're going to have to replace the gas. But keeping it for emergency cooking or emergency water boiling is a great idea. Remember that we always want to boil our water or to filter it in some way that removes both bacteria and viruses. Not every water filter on the market removes viruses. That's why the gold standard is still boiling your water. And just because a river or a body of water looks clear and it looks running and there aren't any signs of infection in the water, doesn't mean that water is drinkable. So always boil your water unless you've got a filter that removes viruses. Now, water filters can be quite expensive. Even something like the Live Straw, which is one of the cheaper versions of the water filters, can be relatively expensive to someone who has to go and buy a whole bug-out bag's worth of equipment. If you don't have the cash for it, keep an oven bag, keep something that you can boil your water with. and learn how to make an improvised water filtration system so that you filter out most of the debris. As far as food goes, you don't have to have MREs in your bag. So this is a packet of brown lentils. It's not going to be the most tasty meal. If I add a little stock cube to my bag as well, I can make it taste nice, or I can add some noodles. Now this morning, before I came out here, I weighed an MRE, one of the military issue MREs, and I weighed this packet of lentils. The military issue MRE came in at just over 600 grams. This packet of lentils is about 500 grams. I'm going to get more meals out of this packet of lentils than I am going to get out of an MRE. However, the MRE is going to do wonders for my mental state when I need to bug out or when I'm in a survival situation. So having that hot cooked meal, something that's really tasty, is really going to benefit you psychologically. But don't feel that you need to go out and buy thousands of rands worth of MREs just to be able to eat something in the wilderness. You can take cheap food. My actual favorite is candy. I know it's terrible, but this also helps me mentally. This also makes me feel a whole lot better about myself in the wilderness. And I actually prefer candy to anything else. So I'm quite happy to keep protein bars and chocolates and things in my bag. I think there are actually a couple in here. It's enough to get me through the first couple of days of my bug out situation. Thereafter, I might have started trapping things, or I might have been able to hunt something. I might have been able to forage something from the environment or fish. I've got some plastic bags around as well. These plastic bags can be used to cover your feet if you have hiking shoes that are not waterproof. So even if you have an old pair of hiking shoes, and depending on the size shoe that you wear, you can pack some plastic bags, put them over your socks, not underneath your socks, and then use them to help to improvise a waterproof membrane inside your shoes. This over here is an oven bag, so it's a food grade bag. You can use an oven bag to boil and contain water. The third plastic bag that I've got is a large recycling bag, a clear plastic bag. It's basically the size of a large rubbish bag. The reason I've got this in here is not just because it's also a way to improvise a shelter, but I can use this plastic bag to acquire water. So if I tie it around the branch of a tree, I secure it there and I leave it there for a day, there's a bit of sunshine, you'll find through transpiration that tree or those leaves in that branch releases water and it accumulates inside the bag. I put a little stone in it so it hangs down. I've even seen people take their camelback water pipe and put it inside the bag and then literally just drink the water from the bottom of the bag without removing the bag from the tree. Remember that you have to actually move the bag from branch to branch, because otherwise that branch is going to start suffering and you're going to deplete your natural resources that way. Well, that's it for my list of budget bug out items, guys. I hope you found some valuable information in this video and that you'll go and drop a comment if you've got some more recommendations or tips. Remember, other people could also benefit from those tips. And until the next time, live ready.